All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in today. You are listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. This is the Adam Messer Show, and I am your host, Adam Messer. And my special guest today is... Okay, yeah, we just got a message from Darlene and Terry Dremel. My very special guest today is James Nettles, a.k.a. Jim, so I'm going to be calling him Jim during the show. Welcome back, Jim. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Hey, Adam. It's always great to be back. I appreciate you having me back on. It's always a lot of fun.
Dude, yeah, I love being able to talk with you, not just on this show, but like just in general. I mean, like it's weird how we become internet, not weird, but it's weird how we become internet friends in a way. And I don't mean weird in a bad way. It's just coincidental type thing where pretty much I think we were introduced like online somehow or another, and we're chit-chatting.
I blame Bobby.
Probably Bobby was the one, but we were chit-chatting and we just kind of hit it off because you have a background in like business and IT, leadership development and writing, and those are things that I've done and things that I like, and so I always have a good time talking with you. So I appreciate you being here today.
Like I say, it's always a great time to come on and hang out.
Yeah. Hey, Bass, you got your, which one is that today? The guitar?
The Ovation.
The Ovation? Okay, so Sebastian, everybody, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that my son Sebastian plays live music in the studio. Sometimes start off with like heavy metal type stuff, and then he's got this Ovation, and he's become quite a picker. You know, he has a band called Krieger that he's starting up. Well, he's had it for a while, but anyway, I always enjoy having him play some. So, Bass, you mind taking it away for us and playing some live music in the studio? Here's Sebastian Messer, everybody. Awesome, Bass. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And looks like we got a message from Darlene and Terry Dremel. So thank you very much, Darlene and Terry, for listening in. And yeah, it says that they really enjoyed that little play there, Bass. So cool. Speaking of Darlene and Terry Dremel, so I got a couple of little announcements I want to go over, Jim, too. At the start of the show here, and I'm really happy for you to be here because one of the things that I was talking about last week and the week before was the Storytellers Mag launch, and you were one of the featured authors, and then also you did an Author's Essential column for us for the magazine, sharing some best practices, and that's going to be like a monthly column with the magazine. So what did you think about that? What I know that you've got your book, Author's Essentials, or business. What is it? I can't remember the exact title. I know it's something like Business Essentials for Writers or something like that. Or
it's business. The book is Business Essentials for Writers. Currently working on the next book in the series, which is going to be targeted more towards book marketing. It's going to be a little bit different take than what you usually see, but it's a marketing book. There's a couple more working on in the series already. Mm-hmm. Right now, trying to key up, we'll be doing a workshop series again based on the book, but it expands much beyond that as well. In fact, right now, just had a meeting earlier today. We are doing. I'm part of LitCon, amongst everything else. For LitCon, we're doing a number of workshops and panels and stuff like that that'll be online. If anybody's interested, that's litcon.org. And But yeah, I'll be doing a lot of virtual workshops. We started up that convention. It's kind of an offshoot of BB8 SciCon that was around for a number of years, and so be doing a number of workshops out of that. So if you're interested in those, please come by and hop on there. And then of course I've got Author Essentials, which is a workshop company, and also we do author services, creative services, both in the fiction and nonfiction realm. And so Author Essentials workshops, we're in the middle of moving platforms and redesigning all of our web presence, all the news and media presence. Mm-hmm. And there's another nice super secret project that ties into all of this that not quite yet ready to make an announcement, but we'll be expanding significantly. A lot of the writing-based workshops and platforms and things like that will be able to actually offer. So,
yeah, I know, and that's pretty exciting. I think that's pretty exciting that, like you've got all these different little projects and going on. What did you think about with the Storytellers Mag with that launch?
So for Storytellers Mag, I was really glad to see you doing this because it's a fun thing that combines both the print media and the podcast media and the auditory media. And of course, it's always fun to do anything at all with Bobby Nash. But it was, I was really happy to be asked to be both kind of do the profile, do the article. But I really do enjoy writing kind of these business tips, business articles, things like that. Mm-hmm. So, giving a platform like this for creatives to come to, I think is fantastic. And, one of the reasons I was really happy to come in and join in with the Storytellers team and do a regular column. We were working with a client this week, and part of the conversation we were having was, in business, most everybody wants to go do the business. They want to write, they want to paint, they want to sculpt, mm-hmm. they want to farm, they want to code, they want to build the game. It's the money side of things and the business side of things that usually gets people in trouble. So anything that I can do that offers knowledge and insight and information that helps people go and take and look at a hobby they're doing or something that they're enjoying in that way, mm-hmm. and potentially turning it into a way of making some money or turning it into a career, mm-hmm. is really important to me. And so Storytellers to me is going to be a great platform, not only of people getting into craft and meeting new artists and meeting new creators, but also learning aspects of craft and how to make it work. So, mm-hmm. I think the Storytellers is going to be a really fun project. And
I tell you what, I think it's so much fun. I mean, honestly, and I'm sorry I didn't mean to cut you off there, but you were saying?
No, I was just going to say I really enjoy projects like this, and because it's the mixed media, you've got both the podcast side of things as well as the print articles. I think is really important because it lets people, it gives people the exposure in a couple of different ways. So mm-hmm. Storytellers to me is going to be really important. And I think it's going to have a lot of reach out from just Savannah. I think it's going to have a lot of reach, period.
I tell you what, I was really surprised too because, I've got a really small list, with the Valhalla Books thing, growing it. I started writing like in 2014 or whatever, so I'm still a new fiction writer, but I didn't publish anything until like 2018. And the idea with Storytellers Mag is, like with this radio show, I talk, and you've been doing a lot of interviews too this last year. So I talk with a lot of authors, and I talk with entertainers, actors, screenwriters, people like that, creative people. But one of the things we do is we're always talking about like the nuts and bolts, and and there's nothing wrong with that. Right. But what I wanted to do with Storytellers Mag was to talk with the authors about the fun side of storytelling, because there is the business side of it too. And, one of the things I wanted to do though, the reason why I was asking you if you would do the author's essential column is to be able to give people something that they can walk away from that can help them with their process, and not just to understand like, okay, well, the author side, James McDonald is your pen name or whatever, right? That when we're talking with you about, why do you enjoy or what do you enjoy about, writing and that kind of thing. And everybody's got a different, everybody's got like a different story about it. Some people it's escapism. Some people it's like, they love connecting with their audience. There's all these different reasons, right? And so that's the whole idea behind the Storytellers Mag. And I wrote that book called Writing a Better Press Release a couple years back because as a journalist, I kept getting less than effective press releases, right? And I feel like that's one of the topics that people don't cover a lot. And so I was like, well, it's a book, maybe I can help people with. And so I know we were talking about I'm going to be revamping it or whatever, but I think that's something, when I saw that you had your Author's Essential book, that was kind of appealing for me. I was like, oh, here's a guy that really understands business and leadership, and a lot of people don't, and not in a bad way, but they just, they don't look at it as like, okay, well, how, I can write the book and I can get it done, but what do I do from there? Kind of thing.
Well, I write because I don't really have a choice. I've written most of my life. I've had, fits and starts of what was published, what was not. A lot of what's been published for me is articles. The fiction side of the world for me is fun. I love it. There's nothing more fun than as I say, it's easier to kill somebody on the page than it is to get rid of the bodies. But
yeah.
That being said, one of the most important things is if you have an ability to communicate effectively, then you can make money. You can make a living. And writing is one of those things that if you learn to use language and you learn to use emotion and you learn how to tell a story, and this ties into storytellers, but if you can learn how to tell that story and you can do it effectively and you can hook people, it's not just about telling them a romance, walking them through the romance or walking them through the adventure or walking them through the horror.
Mm-hmm.
It's also sometimes the story and the journey you carry somebody on is educating them about a new car.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's about educating them about some policy changes coming from government or about any number of things. If you can write and you can be effective, journalism has changed so drastically over the last 20 years. Everybody's got a platform available, and that's a fantastic thing, and it's also a terrible thing because it also means everyone has a platform, and the people that learn to use that most effectively are going to be the ones that ultimately get noticed and are able to carry forward with their message. So, but if you're a creative person, the value in that I think has been seen in 2020 and now even into 2021 and appreciated in a very different way, even if people don't know it.
Mm-hmm. Let me do the station ID real quick.
The values.
Yeah, let me do the station ID real quick. I can't believe it's already that time of the hour. Everybody, you're tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, with my special guest, who is an author and a coach and a lot of cool things like, you do the Scottish games and all too, and a lot of cool stuff, Jim. But James Nettles, everybody's with me, and you're listening today to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. I totally agree with you on that. And I have a couple other announcements I want to go into, and I know you got some cool stuff coming up too. So I just honestly, we got 2 hours here, and I just kind of want to, just talk about like what we got going on. So right before the show, my son Bass and I, we were kicking around, just kind of catting around town or whatever, and we stopped over at Planet Fun, which Jim, it's a local, like it's like one of those local shops that they sell like toys and comics and anime and that kind of stuff, right? And I picked up a copy of number 11, which is the SteeRange Comics. So Terry and Darlene are listening out there. So I just want to share this. I actually met them because I saw SteeRange Comics at this record store called Grayface Records. I was like, look at this. It kind of reminded me of like, because I like comics and all. Kind of reminded me of the old school Mad magazines, and it's just got like this wacky, weird, fun humor. witty stuff. And this new one, 11, is pretty cool looking. It's got on the cover, Jim. I keep wanting to say James, but I'm like tongue tied there. It's got it says SteeRange, and then the E on the end of SteeRange. It's like almost like an MC Escher kind of like there's no end to it. You know what I mean? Like you know those like the staircase that MC Escher did. Where
the inverted staircases that are the optical illusion.
Yeah, this is definitely like one of those optical illusions or whatever. But one of the cool things about this one is it's got a centerfold of the series is like about pretty much this guy and this alien X, and it's got this centerfold, and it says "Be free, be SteeRange," and it's in color, and it's got like all this like bit, like it's got this guy, this alien X or whatever in the middle there and all, and it's a pretty cool little magazine. So I just want to give a shout out to them. The end of the book. You remember the old comic books where they'd have like a little comic inside of a comic?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the end of this one is this comic called Cafe Racer, and I'm just gonna read it. Okay, so it's like this motorcycle guy, right? And I can't. What's that say? It says what? No, a mall. And then, okay, so there's a guy on a motorcycle, and he's thinking, he says, great day for a ride. And then what? Looks like a spot of trouble ahead. And there's another guy. He sees this other guy off the side of the road with a little broken down motorcycle or whatever. And it says, odd modkins, what's the grief? Broke my throttle cable, Cafe. Now what? And Cafe's racer's looking, and he's got his hand in this bag. It says COR. It says, no problem, odds. I'll check the old COR bag. COR? Carry on regardless. Here you go. What's that? And then it's got like the panel goes to, and it says, it looks like a bottle cap type thing. It says, it's a quick fix end for a cable. Just run it to the end of the cable through the hole and tighten down with the screwdriver. Off you go. And they're called solderless nipples. I carry one for the clutch and for the throttle. Keep your cables lubed up properly. It'll get you home. And then it goes to the next panel. It says, by the odds, that is one wild helmet. And the guy's got like this funny looking black helmet or whatever. And he goes, what helmet? That's my hair. And then you see him driving off putt. But the reason I read that is because like I don't have time to read the other one. But it's kind of like that wacky wild humor. And I just love that kind of stuff. I love stuff that's not homogenized and, repetitious or whatever. I like, stuff that's different, like SteeRange. It's definitely a SteeRange comic. You know what I mean? It's really cool.
Well, here's one of the great things about where we're in now is no matter what it is, you can get almost anything you want to out there. And it's opened up the indie field so much. So if you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to do comics, if you want to be a writer, it doesn't really matter what you want to do. The tools are available and really cost effective to do pretty much anything you want to do. It's the question of, are you willing to put in the time to build up skills, to build everything up to then do what you really want to do. But I think from the piece you just read, the idea of carry on regardless, that's probably the biggest lesson out of that right there is no matter what, things are going to break, things are going to happen, stuff's not going to work like you expected it to, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always a way to fix it, but often it's when you go off the road, things break, you're stuck sitting there, then all of a sudden something shows up and you learn a lesson or you get an opportunity. Or sometimes you just get frustrated and you're looking as to why did something break again. You got to look at what's happened and why and try to see what you can learn from it. And sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do. But if you don't pick up and carry on, then nothing happens. And I really think that that's an important lesson from what you just read is you just got to be willing to sometimes all you can do is carry on long enough to get home. Then you can figure out what to do next. But the important thing is always be able to get home, and then you can always figure out what to do next.
Yeah, the old school, like when comics used to be more like funnies, the funny papers.
Oh yeah,
That's what this is like. This is very much like a very old school feel to the, like it really is. It's like what comic books started off as. I mean, I was looking at, I saw something the other day. It was a Superman comic, and I didn't read it. I just saw like a picture of the cover, and it said, it had like 4 amazing Superman stories, right? And I was thinking to myself, I was like, when did that change? When did it go from like, it being fun to, more serious? I'm thinking it's probably like in the 70s is when they flipped it, whatever. But you always had like different style comics or whatever. But I love this. I love this series. I've got all the issues. I actually even have a special edition of number 9, which was a birthday card that he made for me last year. And it was pretty cool. So I'm like the only one in the world that has that one. So.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Well, so we've got the new Comics Layer series running on Con-Tinual. So may have to get him in when we do some of the indie comic stuff coming up.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I'm actually going to have him on for the Savannah Authors Expo in April. So that'll be cool. That would be great to have him on the comic book track. But yeah.
So talking about the old days of comics, we actually just did a show not long ago. So we started a comics track. We've now released the first. We're up to, I think, episode number 5, and it's kind of a more sporadic show right now. We're still trying to get it into a cycle, but we did one with a bunch of the old guys, who were from New York, but they were involved in comics in the 70s and 80s, and a number of them are still involved in it today. But it was fun talking about that changeover when things went from kind of selling comics was really mercenary. I mean, I remember as a kid, we had the spinner racks in the store. We had comics, we sold comics, all that stuff.
They still had that when I was a kid, believe it or not. Like you go to the gas station or the convenience store, and they still had the spinner racks. Like, and I'm not that much younger than you, but I mean, like, I don't know when they phased it out, like if it was in the 90s or what. But I definitely remember the spinner racks, and then like you go to the magazine racks or whatever.
Well, it was fun because they were telling stories about how it was almost guerrilla comic book sales. Was you ran to the auction, you bought your stacks of books, and then you rushed to try to get them on the shelves, and you just sort of wound up with whatever you got. But one of the fun stories they talked about was in the 80s, driving around New York City in a van, shaking a handbell out the window because it was a rented van, so they didn't want to mount a bell to the side of it. Everybody would come out running thinking it was ice cream, and they're selling comic books out of the back of a big white panel van.
Oh, wow.
And so part of what we were doing the show on was that transition from the auctions to going to, Diamond and that distribution network and how all that works now. But it was a really interesting story, both because it was fun just hearing some of the old stories from the old days when everything was simpler. Actually, I read that as it was a lot easier because everything was a mess and nobody knew what was going on. But it was that guerrilla thing of let's see what's going to happen and what's going to work. And I think that, again, we're kind of back in those days now of what's going to work with the internet. How do I find an audience? How do people discover my book? And I think that's, again, some of the really fun and important stuff of where we're at today.
Do you have access to your computer real quick?
I can. Give me 1 second.
Okay. The reason why I'm saying is because I don't think that this will play through the aux on the radio, but I want to talking about like, how do you find stuff or whatever. Before we started talking to everybody on the radio, we were talking beforehand, and I came across this really interesting serialized. It's like a new show, but it's called the Aberdeen Tapes, and I am going to let me go to this real quick. I'm not gonna.
Your business.
Can you hear that, Jim?
What you might not know.
No, I can't.
Okay.
But I'm pulling it up.
Okay, hold on.
Bodies of water connected to Lake Gore.
Okay, there's one called the new Aberdeen Tapes trailer, It's like a 1 minute thing. I'm going to play it on the radio here with us because just talking about like, finding new stuff or whatever. But I came across this one. I thought it was so interesting.
I found the
My
new
name
Aberdeen
is Victor
Tapes
Jones.
on YouTube.
I don't know
All right.
who's listening to this, and I doubt I'll ever get to meet you in person. I'm not even sure if you've ever heard of me, but none of that matters. All that matters is that you listen. I have always believed that the
found the
people
trailer.
deserve to
1
know
minute.
the truth.
Yeah.
That's why I've sent you these tapes of my program. This isn't just about me. This is about the legacy of an entire city. A legacy of heroes, monsters, and mad science. For the sake of every man, woman, and child in the city of New Aberdeen, you have to listen to these tapes. And if it's not too late, help us. Get the word out to as many people as possible before...
And then the tape kind of just cuts off, and it's got the marquee. It says, the new Aberdeen Tapes. And we'll wait a second here for Jim to hear it.
Yeah.
But
I'm actually watching it now. About 10 seconds left.
okay. And but you remember the old radio serials? Now, when I was a kid, those were mostly like just reruns, right? And they didn't, like I don't remember a whole lot of like playing on the radio or whatever. But when I was a kid, we used to listen to the AM radio station, and they would play these old radio serials from time to time. Well, this one is a new series, or new-ish. It came out in 2017, but they just put out a new episode. And so I started listening to it the other night, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty neat." It's kind of well, I don't want to just say new pulp, but it's kind of like set in the 30s or 40s, and you could tell it's got that like that radio. I am on the radio voice, and you are listening to me here today. Like that monotone type voice that they used, and it was pretty interesting though. It reminded me of like this old sci-fi. So the premise of the show is kind of like where they're up in Maine in this city called Aberdeen. It's already been kind of isolated already, but due to some kind of radiation or some kind of atomic problem or whatever, that the city gets quarantined like in 1950 or whatever. And so this series is supposed to be like where they uncovered these old radio serial tapes. It's called the Aberdeen Tapes or whatever. And man, it was just one of those things where I came across it and I'm like, oh, this is different. This is something, kind of interesting and new. And I think it's just on YouTube. I don't think it's like an audiobook or anything like that. Well, I think the guy's just really literally doing a series just on YouTube.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the old radio serials. In fact, Dad at Christmas gave me a hard drive loaded up with them.
What a small world. Because we've never talked about that before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I've actually written some radio plays, a couple of which have been done by some radio theater groups over the years. But one of the things that I recommend, like on a panel, if I'm sitting there talking to somebody and somebody's asking about how do you tell a story, how do you tell an engaging story, I'm like, go listen to old radio plays. Because while you can set a lot of stuff with the Foley work and with the background music and whatnot, set emotion, if you listen to dialogue, because it all has to be done with the dialogue, you can create so much emotion in so fast a time. And if you ever look at the script that's used for some of these old radio plays, look at how little language is actually there, how short it is, but how dynamic a story you can tell in 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what this reminded me of, was like these little compact episodes or whatever, and it's a story within a story. So like you're listening to it like they've uncovered like kind of like alien files or whatever, and you're listening to it from that perspective. But when they're doing the quote unquote radio show, it's supposed to have happened at the time, like these people were real. They were living through it or whatever. And so the whole thing, like, the way that they do the story within a story is pretty interesting to me. And I was like, oh man, you're so right. I feel like, you can get a lot out of listening to older, not just radio stuff, but like watching older movies or older sitcoms and things like that. I got to do the station ID stuff real quick, Jim, and then we'll come back, and then I'd love to hear more about what your thoughts are on that.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming. And it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going. And you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to wruu.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
This is a message from the Georgia State Department of Public Health. There is a State of Georgia hotline people can call with questions or if they think they may have been exposed to the COVID-19 virus. It is 1-844-442-2681. If you believe you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or have been exposed to the novel coronavirus, please contact your primary care doctor, an urgent care clinic, or your local federally qualified healthcare center. Please do not show up at an emergency room or healthcare facility unannounced. More information can be found at dph.georgia.gov. From our cobblestone streets to our stately homes, discover Savannah's maritime history and what makes Savannah, Savannah. One of the hidden secrets of Savannah is the Gardens of the Ships of the Sea Museum. Picnic here and enjoy our complimentary Wi-Fi. More information can be found at shipsofthesea.org.
This is WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul.
All right, and we're back, everybody. So, Jim, you were saying with the radio serials and how much they can convey with very little dialogue.
Well, if you go and read, I mean, for example, I think one of the radio plays is most famous and a lot of people know about, of course, is Orson Welles' interpretation of War of the Worlds.
Right, yeah.
Now, granted, a lot of that was about the style and the format and the setup to be a news type setup. But if you ever go and read the script for that and then listen to the radio play, you'll be amazed how fast it moves, how fast it goes, and even with a little bit of exposition that's used to set up, in that, with the narrator describing what they see and what's going on and what's happening, because so much of that is just the narrator. And that's why I think that one is individually so unique, is while there's some dialogue, there's conversation. So much of that's the narrator describing what they see and what's happening. Looking at the pacing and the story structure and how much is done with so tight a writing is one of those things that will teach you pacing. It was one of those things that will teach you how important every word is in the process.
I think too, man, back in the day.
People to do.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just thinking back in the day, like when when radio first came out, when you're talking about that conciseness of use of language or whatever, it was expensive to have a radio show, right? I guess they had film, they had serialized film or whatever, but they didn't have TV like it is today, and when you think about like, okay, well, we have to do, like even with our show, like this show here, I have to do the station ID at the 15-minute mark. I do the underwriting announcements at the 30-minute mark, and then we do at the 45. That's very minimal compared to like most commercialized radio stations today, right? And so when they were doing these serials, I could imagine, back then it was like, well, you've got 5 minutes for copy, and you've got to get this 3-act play done in these 5 minutes or whatever, or 15 minutes or whatever it was. And I think a lot of it with that being concise was that they knew the same thing. If you don't capture somebody's attention, they're not going to listen. They're not going to, they're not going to watch the show or whatever. you know?
Well, and if you look at radio shows from 30s, 40s, 50s, you know, moving into the advent of television, that was what you had. Was you were sitting. You could almost look at it like I'm sitting around the campfire. Somebody's telling the story or somebody's telling the play, but it was something that everyone could sit and consume. But you had, and the other thing was, you had to write it for such a broad audience because the entire family would be sitting there. So you had to be able to capture the attention of the kids as well as the adults in telling the story. And I think that's where you see, in certain ways, the story structure was very basic, but it was very fundamental, and it was they caught you fast. You were in, you were out, you had the emotional impact. Now, if you were doing a serial like a Flash Gordon or something like that went for a longer range serial, you could tell a story, but you still had to get the story into that block of 30 minutes or an hour or whatever the case was you had, or even 5 minutes, because you had to tell the story and keep your audience, because you wanted to keep them for the ads and the revenues, because at the end of the day, still a business. You still have to pay the bills. Wasn't free then, isn't free now.
Yeah. I think the same is like with anything, and I keep going back to the storytelling thing or whatever, because, you know, I kind of feel like we're storytelling creatures, you know. You look at the evolution of how media has changed, and, you know, I know you're talking about journalism or whatever, and I've been a freelance journalist for the Savannah Morning News since 2014, so I've seen, you know, even with our local newspaper, I've seen a lot of changes, you know, and it's interesting to me how the message, the way that it's delivered changes a lot, but the fundamentals of storytelling are still there. You know, so like, for example, TikTok is a wildly popular social media app right now, right? And a lot of people are using like Facebook, and, you know, people use TikTok, or they use Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that. But I feel like one of the reasons why TikTok is so, like, has just exploded over the last couple of years is because it's a video platform where people can make 15-second videos all the way up to a minute video. You can have music with it, and you can have like different effects and things like that. And they're always adding new things, but they go back to storytelling, right? And so I think some of the other platforms, you know, that, like, I think, I'm not talking about politics at all, and I don't want to get into politics, but I think one of the things that we saw was, you know, like you said earlier, everybody has access to a platform, and not everybody is, you know, putting out, you didn't say this part, but I'm saying this part. Not everybody's putting out accurate information. And so having that access to it is, you know, it's the platform is there. You know, just like with publishing, anybody and everybody who wants to publish a book can, right? And they should. I really think that they should. But there's a difference when you're just putting out spam, versus like you're actually trying to focus on the story. You're trying to like reach your audience, and it's not going to be everybody. Like, you know, like this Aberdeen tape thing. Like, if I didn't like, you know, kind of oddball stuff, or like something that's just different or whatever, I would have probably looked at that and thought, I might not have even gotten past the little crayon colored marquee. You know what I mean? But because I like that kind of stuff, I was like, oh, let me listen to this. Let me check it out. And I ended up enjoying it, you know?
Well, one of the big things that we see now is, because when we were growing up, you pretty much had three choices. You know, Coke, Pepsi, or RC Colas. Since we'll go with a nice little regional. But I mean,
did you drink the RCs with a moon pie? Eating a moon pie?
Allergic to chocolate, and I couldn't stand the banana ones.
Oh,
but yeah, I know, terrible.
I don't feel bad for you. That just means more for me, right?
Yeah,
I'm kidding, man. I'm kidding.
You had three choices, and I mean, the important part of those days of when it was three core networks, was that you had kind of a choice as to where you went for your entertainment, but it also created a sense of common culture. You know, if you had three choices, you know, kind of how they stacked up and who competed against who to draw audience and to draw attention, you had to be a good storyteller. You had to really hold people. Otherwise, you got a season.
Yeah.
Because usually you're going to get a season no matter what, or maybe at least a half a season. But you really had to tell a tight story because competition was tight, but at the same time your options were limited. Now your options are infinite. And so the good part of that is your options are infinite. If you're interested in something, you can find it. The problem is that means that you've got to go looking for it or have somebody tell you, by the way, did you know this exists? And it's a much, while the competition out there is much harder to be noticed and to be found, the truth of it is you can get out there to be found, where back in those days, the competition to create something that could be found was the hard part.
Yeah, if you wanted to self-publish, you were like going to the, using a Xerox machine or something like that, It was not the same. Or you paid thousands of dollars to like a vanity publisher to publish your own book,
Right.
And now today it's like you have, you if you have a computer and you have a word processing file and you go on the internet, you can open up and you can publish yourself on a blog or whatever. If you want to publish it as a book, you can go on, the different outlets or whatever. And yeah, it's amazing to me, because the accessibility is so much more open now,
Well, and I think there's one other thing that's important about that, though. It means that the diversity of thought, the diversity of idea, and the diversity of story is now available in a way that it never was before.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we see historically is if we look at, and I'm going to do a little bit of a gaming reference here, but think about the Bard. We joke about the Bard for antisocial behavior and alcohol consumption. I'm trying to play nice here. But, wine, women, and song. We'll go with that idea. And generally, they're going to have started the fight because they're going to said and have done something. Then they're going to tell the story or play the music while the fight goes on.
You know what I've never understood with the Bard thing was, like, the Bard was the fantasy version of the rock star, right? I could not understand why people adore and love the rock star, but they would like ridicule the Bard. And I was like, do you realize this is just like a medieval rock star, right? This is like the the medieval version of the rock star for the fantasy role playing game, right? I'm like, oh man.
Well, it was the rock star and scam artist all rolled into one. Oh wait.
Well, aren't a lot of rock stars kind of like a front man for things? I mean, you never know.
Of course.
Yeah. Hey, we got to do the station ID real quick. Everybody, you're tuning in today to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And by that, I mean, like, I'm not saying, but over the years, we've seen so many different scandals with rock stars and stuff like that. And, it's almost like assumed with that culture. It's like, oh, if they're a big rock star, they're into, drugs and, all kinds of, crazy stuff, And I think kind of going back to the Bard thing, with storytelling, like people like music, people like a good yarn, they like a good story, and they like a charismatic storyteller. I mean, like if I, and I'm not the best storyteller in the world when I'm talking or whatever, but like if you put me up next to someone who's like, well, and today we were, talking about, and they just can't keep your attention. I'm going to win that storytelling competition, and people are going to want to listen to me, versus the guy's like, well, sound like a Squidward type character. Hey, Bass is looking at me. It's time to play, isn't it? It's time to play, isn't it? Okay. Jim, what were you going to say? And then Bass is going to play.
Well, so look at The Witcher. So series, do you think that it would have gained the same level of audience? Because part of what you see here is you're seeing the story told through the eyes of the storyteller. if it was just The Witcher and the Monster Hunter of the Week. But so many of the memes and so much of the cultural identity around The Witcher is tied into the idea of the bard is following him around, both to be a nuisance, but also there to tell the story. And by seeing the eyes of somebody who's basically, otherwise would be kind of gruff and it's who I killed this week, you get the sense of relief, you get the sense of humor, you get that sense of humanity through the other person's eyes because they stretch the truth. They sing the songs, they come through, they spin up the person coming to town. And we as the audience are just as tied into him telling the story to us from this way as the people sitting in the bar are spinning up the story of the great Witcher that's coming to town. And he'll handle your dragon for you, but give a coin for your Witcher.
Toss a coin to your Witcher.
Look at
with that, hold on a second. Yep, Bass, take it away, man. Speaking of the bard playing, we got Bass in here playing some live music for us. Bass, thank you very much. And Jim, I don't know if you heard that or not, but I tried to do the phone where you could hear it on the speaker thing. So, but it'll be on the podcast.
Yep. I'm gonna put him to work to do. We need a theme song for Con-Tinual.
I'll tell you, yeah, he's the one. He can play heavy metal and acoustic. But yeah, man, I love the thing I love too, Jim, like. Every time you and I talk, there's like new stuff going on. Like you're always, working and doing and producing things. I think that's a big part of storytelling. Is like you might have. Josh Vasquez and I were talking about this because we just started doing this Valhalla Books podcast, but we were talking about like, okay, everybody can have an idea, right? And Josh brought this up in his podcast, but. Ideas are great. Ideas are wonderful. We can't do new things without new ideas. Translating that idea into something that's physical and done and, you did it. I think that's a big difference because, like, Jim, if let me ask you, honestly, and this is an old question, but if I gave you $1 for every time somebody said, hey, man, I've got a story idea.
Let's see. I have to carry the cube, and yeah.
I'm just saying, like you get that all the time, don't you? Like, oh, I got a great story idea.
Absolutely.
Or you should write about this. I'm like, nah, dude, why don't you write about it? Like, it's your idea. Why don't you write about it?
Yeah, I always love the thing. There's a couple of things, and for anybody out there that is a burgeoning writer, this is one of those things I do want you to take to heart. Is no matter what the medium is, no matter what kind of story you want to tell your story and ask for help, because no matter what your story is that you want to tell, the three things that will always raise a red flag for me. Number one, somebody comes and says, yeah, I'd like you to take a look at my manuscript, but I need you to sign an NDA first.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's an automatic no.
Yeah.
Because, to even talk about your manuscript and talk about your story idea, and this is one of those things that's always painful for all of us to hear, and we've all heard it at some point, is that's great, it's not original.
You want to hear something really funny about that? You want to hear something really funny about that? And I'm not not accusing anybody of this, but how many times have I talked about shovels and jeans? Like, being aware of like shovels and jeans, and the folks that made the money during the gold rush were the folks selling the shovels and jeans, not the folks doing the mining. So yep. Be aware of that. Well, I saw an influencer, I'm not going to name the name, but I saw a social media influencer that they were talking about the same thing No credit to me, no nothing. And I know that it's not original. I know, but like honestly, it's like one of the things that I was talking about. Like I've been talking about that, and shovels and jeans thing, and I'm like, buyer beware. Like, don't fall for like, oh hey man, sign up for my course because I whatever. And the same thing with those folks that, like, I had somebody that wanted to ask me some advice about publishing or whatever, and about 45 minutes or an hour later, it's just like, oh yeah, I already know that. I'm like, well, why are you calling me? If you knew that already, why are you calling me? I just spent an hour of my time helping you, or I thought I was helping you, and like everything you're like, so it was just a waste of my time. And when you said, oh, I've got to have you sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. No, dude, you're not. I'm not doing it. I'm sorry. You're not the next Stephen King, or you're not the next Anne Rice or whatever. I'm sorry. And if you think that if you think your stuff is so great, well, why are you asking me to just give you a friendly once over of it? If it's that great, go and pitch it to Paramount, or go and pitch it to Warner Brothers, or go and pitch it to Marvel.
I mean, and for me, it's different because, again, generally, when I put on my author hat, I don't review other people's manuscripts. Now, friends or clients, sure, will do a critique, but if somebody's just like, hey, can you do you want to read through my manuscript? There are people for whom I will do that. There are people for whom I will do critique and developmental editing.
Like the ones that they're acting like they're doing you a favor by letting you read it first. I'm like, really? Come on, man.
Right.
Like, what?
Here's one of those challenges that you have to remember. If you come to an author that is more established and well-published and everything else, they have to take on a risk by having looked at and trying to help you out. Because here's the thing. It may not be that they intentionally take or borrow or leverage, but if you go in, no matter what, when you read every piece of material, and most good authors read voraciously, you don't necessarily remember where something came from. An idea may pop into your head, and it's how you execute on the idea. It's not the idea itself. I mean, if you go back,
oh yeah,
I was looking back through an article that was based around some of the lawsuits and copyright infringement, looking at the fact that George Lucas tried to sue Glenn Larson over Battlestar Galactica because Adventure in Space, basically they said, yeah, you ripped off our idea. And the court said no. There's plenty of lawsuits that are out there of more recent times with TV shows that were based on book series and saying, well, your series was so close to mine in these ways.
Mm-hmm.
Did you rip somebody off? Was it influenced by, or is it just a matter of you executed on the tropes in such a similar way? But if you go to an author and say, hey, can you read this? If they're working on something even remotely similar as a project, or something comes up down the road, this can now impede their ability to do the work. So what you have to remember is when you're coming to another author or another creator, asking them to look at your material is not only taking up the time for them, it's also the fact you're now potentially putting them at a liability.
I got to close the hour on this thought, too, because I want to go into this more for the next hour, Jim. But we've got to wrap it up for this hour. But, my thinking on that, have you, and I'm just going to throw this out there, not have you, but when was the last time that someone connected with you on Facebook and the first thing that they sent to you was a link to their book? Not a hi, hello, or nothing.
About 3 hours ago.
Right. Don't do that, folks. That is the rudest thing in the world to me, and that will be an instant block on my part. I would just not even acknowledge you. I would just block you. I will you'll be like, I thought I sent that to where is Adam? Oh, I don't know. I can't find his profile anywhere. So don't do that, folks, please. All right. So everybody, Jim, real quick for people that listen to the podcast, where can they find your stuff? Like, what's one link?
Find me. The one link is jamespnettles.com.
Perfect. All right, we'll be back, everybody, at 4. More with author James Nettles, a.k.a. Jim, who is a really interesting fellow and a friend of mine, and I'm really happy to have you here today, Jim. Thank you.